Welcome to the Macon Atlanta podcast. I'm your host, Brent Macon. We are talking to inspiring Atlantans about big questions, bold ideas, better living. Christian Ross just personifies that. She is the Chief Happiness Officer and the founder of Happy Talks, a platform that helps combat loneliness in seniors by providing consistent phone calls from trained conversationalists. She's an accomplished professional in the commercial real estate space and brings a hospitality mindset to her work and relationships. We discussed the need for Happy Talks, common challenges that families and seniors have as they age, and what advice she'd have for anyone listening who has an aging parent. Thank you, Christian, for sharing your time with me and for all you're doing to make Atlanta and the world a more hospitable place. Without further ado, please enjoy the conversation with Christian Ross. Christian, thank you for being here. I've been looking forward to this.
Me too.
Thank you for joining. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Would love if you could start by telling us a little bit about Happy Talks, what it is, how you got there, and kind of your background and how it led us to this.
Yeah, so at Happy Talks, we provide social phone calls for older adults. So long story short, we call your grandma. We make sure that she's not feeling as lonely. And our whole goal is that we are a supplement to the care that you provide her, the care and the love. So our buddies are background checked. They love talking to older adults. And then for families, our whole goal is that we are delivering peace of mind because we are reporting to them after each call and they know exactly who their loved one is talking to. And for me, my journey here has actually been real estate. Okay. I've been a real estate broker for a really long time, and I was in sales as well as management, and I was also part of a prop tech startup, had an exit. So for me, I have just been front row to families' lives for a really long time, and I've just noticed the difference in the past 5 to 7 years. You know, families have all the things they have to do, and then of course they have their loved one who's getting older, they're aging. Maybe things are changing. So that's how I got here.
What was genesis for the idea? Like, how did you come up with Happy Talks and how did you know you were onto something?
So it came to me because I noticed that I was talking to my clients' parents for like 1 to 2 hours. And it was really like I would call them to give them an update on the sale or give them an update on something. And then I would call the mom or dad and give them an update. And then I would just say, so wait a minute, where'd you live before you lived here? And da-da-da. And next thing you know, I'm on the phone for an hour. And I'm like, wow, okay. Yeah. And I have an aunt, she has MS. And I had a front row view to some of the things she was experiencing. She's young. She's like mid-60s. And so to not be able to do the things that you see your peers doing, I could tell that had an impact. But I just kept reading about fraud, and my mom's an auditor. And I remember as a kid, her going into the credit union that she worked in and telling the tellers, please make sure to watch out for our elders. Please make sure to watch out for seniors. There's Western Union scams.
Oh, gosh.
And so if someone comes in here and they want to send a Western Union to a different place, somewhere that they don't really usually give money to, like, please stop, pause. And she would notice as much as she would tell the tellers, it's still, you had that 5% that would pay attention. Yeah. And the other people were just like, oh, it's business as usual.
How old were you when your mom was setting that example?
I was 11.
Okay.
Yeah, I was, she's been an auditor for a long time. She's still auditing contract wise, but just for a long time. And she also taught fraud prevention. So she would always go, so then she worked for, a company. They recently changed their name, but they've been around for like 100 years. And she had probably a multi-state territory. And so she would go to different credit unions and do fraud prevention and all types of different things. So I would always hear about her travels and what she would do. And then also she did robbery training. So it was wild learning from her. And so now I realize like a lot of the things that I saw growing up, I think is definitely a part of my business and why I also I already care, but I have a different level of care.
Yeah. What was that path from, okay, I'm talking to realtor clients' parents for a longer time to now having a business that is trying to do that? Like, what were some of like the major steps and stage gates, and how did you know like there's a there worth pursuing?
So it was one of those things where I was watching a show, and it was talking about scammers. And I was enraged because these people were scamming senior citizens out of like $20,000, $10,000. Yeah. And then the scammers would say, well, they're lonely. They'll be okay. They can afford it. They're lonely. And it infuriated me. And I was just like, I had already just kind of been thinking about what could I do? And then I'm like, well, if they're lonely, we can talk to them. And so I had already been in Atlanta Tech Village building a business before. And I said, let me come back. And so I applied to the It Takes a Village pre-accelerator. Okay. So it helped me with the customer discovery. It helped me with all the things to see, would this be a viable business and work towards a minimum viable product. So that was my stepping stone to say, hey, this is a business. And then I just started interviewing healthcare professionals, older adults, anyone who would talk to me, I would talk to them.
And who is the customer? Like, who are you selling to?
So we are selling, really, I would say we have multiple customers. So we have the family who is living with the older adult, and they want to help them socialize. Because the one thing about it is that when you're getting to your 90s, that's a lonely club. Yeah. It's a lonely club. Like, you may have one or two, maybe three living friends from your time period. And so it's that person who has their loved one living with them, and they're like, I want to help them socialize some more. Then it's also the people who are self-isolating in senior communities, or that senior community that has people coming in, but they want to make sure that they acclimate to the environment. Because that's really hard after you've lived somewhere for 40 years. Yeah. And then you go into basically seniors high school. I mean, it just is what it is. It's different. And then also to government agencies, because there are a lot of government agencies that are focused specifically on older Americans. And so those government agencies are also our customers too.
How do you define what a senior and a senior citizen is? Because it tends, my dad gets some senior citizen discounts. He's not 90 years old living by himself in an old folks home. Like, big range, like who's your target, who's not your target, and why?
So I would say our target is really those individuals who are experiencing social isolation. So maybe they have a chronic illness and they're not able to go out to the grocery store themselves. They're not able to go to plays and out to different events. So that person who's socially isolated, or maybe they just actually have a physical condition where they're not able to get out of the house, but they definitely are older. We do not deal with teenagers. We do not have anyone middle-aged. That is not our market.
Totally.
Our whole goal is that we want older adults to feel seen and heard. So for us, it starts at 65, but I would say for our members, that age really starts at probably 75.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what does it entail? Like, what does somebody get? What's their experience if they work with you all?
Yes. So thanks for asking. They have a great experience. Our whole goal with them is that they are, our whole goal is that they are receiving an experience where that senior just feels special, that they feel seen, they feel heard. So family members or agencies would sign up. Agencies would need to call us, but family members can go on our site. They can sign up. And once they sign up for 1 call per week, 2 calls per week, or 3 calls per week. And then based off of that, we have 3 plans, $49, $99, and $149. And then every month, in addition to those calls, they get happy mail. And so that mail is just handwritten note, just saying like, we enjoyed talking with you, and mentioning something from that conversation. Yeah. And then every quarter, they get a happy box. And that box is filled with things based on our conversation. Again, just reinforcing, we hear you, we see you, and we think you're amazing.
So when you're offering that, all phone calls, or any of those video calls, or any of those in person, and like how have you navigated making those decisions as you approach that? So
we are all phone calls. In the Atlanta area, we do a lot of community events at senior communities, but for us, we are all phone. And we actually really like that because of the fact that it's one of the first pieces of technology that they really had as older adults. Yeah. It was the phone. And then they'll tell stories like, man, we used to have the party line. And I'm like, that was a real thing? They're like, yeah, you have a line. It's for the whole street. And, if someone picks up, you get off because you don't want to stay on the phone while someone else is talking. And I'm like, what? So it's amazing because we get to hear these stories, but the phone was such an important and just huge part of their life. So our focus has been, we want to talk to them on the phone. Yeah. And maybe we'll get to video in the future, but right now we just want it to be phone. We want them to hear a voice, know it's reassuring, and know that they have their set buddies, their 2 to 3 buddies that they talk to.
Yeah. How many of these do you think you've done at this point?
So we started in 2021, and to me, the first year was really a lot of research, a lot of getting things ready. But last year we delivered over 400 phone calls. Yeah. This year right now we'll probably be closer to like 1,500, but our goal is that by the end of this year, like we would be able to hit over 2,000 phone calls.
How much time have you spent on the phone talking to older folks at this point?
Oh, I've spent a lot of time. I've spent a lot of time in person, a lot of time on the phone. I would definitely say at least 10 hours a week that I spend talking.
What sticks out to you from that experience about, and I'm asking from a business standpoint, but more than that, from like a lived experience standpoint, like what do you see folks going through that makes you feel happy or sad or worried, or like, what is that like having talked? I mean, you got to be in like the 1% of people who doesn't work in that setting, but has spent that much time talking to folks. Like what sticks out?
I think what sticks out is the, really like the tenacity of people. Like someone may not be feeling good, or they may have just had, situations that have happened in their life that they're telling you about that right now, to me in this culture, someone would be like, oh my gosh, life is over. And they're telling these things and you're like, you are so strong. You are so brave. And they're just like, oh no, not me. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
What's an example?
I think an example would be, good example. I think a good example would be one of our members was talking about a time that he was at war and what he saw. And I was like, you are the sweetest human I've ever met. And I can't imagine how you're still so sweet after that experience. And his exact words were, what choice do I have? Yeah. This is my life. And I was like, you're right. And so it was funny because one person who's not a member, who we're trying to get to be a member, he specifically said, he was like, I think it's helpful to talk to people. And he was like, I don't think I need to talk to people. That's what we were talking about. Because I was like, why don't you join us? We'd love to talk to you. He's like, yeah, I don't think I need anyone really to talk to. Like I talk to my birds. Oh. I talk to my dog. And I was like, okay.
And they're great listeners.
And they're great. Exactly. They're great listeners. And I was like, well, we're great listeners too. I was like, why don't you try us out? We have a 2-week trial. And so he just agreed last week that he would do a trial with us. Because I'm like, your dogs can't talk back. They can't ask you questions. The birds are definitely not. Yeah. Well, the bird may ask a question. But yeah, no.
Yeah. And what do you think, when people think about older folks, what are some maybe misconceptions that you see in either popular culture, popular sentiment about what's it like to be older?
Okay. So please do this. Please actually remove this word from your vocabulary. Elderly. Like, let's stop calling 70-year-olds elderly. Yeah. They're not elderly. Yeah. They are older adults. They are senior citizens. Or you can even ask them, what do you like to be called in reference to your age? Yeah. Elderly is not it. I mean, this is a different generation. And the 70-year-olds of 2024 are way different than the 70-year-olds of 1994. They're super different. And I think it's also too making sure that like you don't change your language or your tone because someone's older. Like the baby language is real. People really do that. They'll be like, oh, how are you today? I'm like, they can hear. Yeah. And even if they can't hear,
that means be louder, not change your tone.
Yeah, be louder. Don't change your tone. So I think it's those things. And also too, I would also just say having a curiosity, or also if you see someone at the grocery store and they're struggling with their bag, or you see someone, getting to their car, they need help, like whatever, asking them if they need that assistance. Some people don't want it. But I think it's another way of helping people feel seen. Like no matter what age you are, everyone wants to feel seen. Yeah. But I think especially as you get older, and especially as you're a woman, and you're a woman who's younger, And people are like, hey, girl, when you're walking down the street, like, you don't want it, but it's what happens. And then you have that realization as you're getting older that those things aren't happening anymore. So it's like now maybe you're 60 and it's like, man, the way men even give me attention or people give me attention is different. Yeah. So I think it's just truly just being kind always, but really when it comes to older adults, like, stop saying I talked to this elderly woman and this woman that you're talking about is 75 going to go play pickleball.
Yeah.
She ain't elderly.
What is older adult high school like?
Oh man, it's interesting. So the senior communities that I've been in a lot. I love it because you get to see the cliques. It's like high school in a way. You see the cliques that form. And when people are coming in, how they have to acclimate to that environment. And that's why, too, we really say if you know someone who's moving into a community, they're moving into a retirement community, like, definitely let's talk about our service because it's a whole new world.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know how your life is when you're at home. Oh, the mail gets dropped off at this time. I go for a walk at this time. I know that my neighbor comes home at this time. Once you move into a community, your entire daily rhythm is different now. Yeah. It's completely different. So it's like acclimating to that is so important. But it's interesting because a lot of times everyone's moving to where their kids are. So they're from all different walks of life, all different parts of the country. And they're like finding their way again, which is interesting seeing them navigate. And then you see the little romantic relationships. I actually hosted speed dating at a retirement community.
All right. Tell me about retirement and speed dating. How was that?
It was a lot of fun. There was one woman there, which it's interesting. This is a magic number I've been hearing for marriage, 65 years.
She had been married for 65 years.
She lost her husband after they were married 65 years. Another woman was 61. Another man yesterday, the other week, who I met a few days ago, actually. Yeah, it was like 2 days ago. 65 years. It's very interesting to keep hearing 61, 65. Yeah. But I'm sorry, what was your question?
Just what was speed dating like? I mean, I can't really imagine being back on the market after having been married somebody since what, late 1950s?
Right.
And all of a sudden you're dating? Like, that's crazy.
Well, it was funny because they were the men. Most of the men who were there couldn't hear. First of all,
yeah. So
I had to keep repeating the question. All the women could hear, and they were like, "Oh man, he still can't hear." And I'm like, I'm trying not to laugh. I'm like, I'm laughing with you. Like, please just know I'm laughing with you. But everyone was so open. I thought that was so cool. So I would basically ask questions like, "Oh, where'd you love to travel to?" So they would talk back and forth with each other. So it was nice seeing them engage. And I feel like no one really wanted to make a love connection. They were just kind of there. Yeah. And then one woman who was married 65 years said, it's time for me to get back out there. I was like, you like it, I love it. Like, let's get you back out there. And there was actually, we were going to do it again last week. Yeah. And the community did not realize they had a event scheduled at the same time that was an outing. So all the men were at the Cheesecake Factory when we were going to start. So we just ended up making it like a ladies' connection circle.
Okay, nice.
But next time we're doing it bachelor style. We're going to have bachelor and bachelorette. So that way there's one person and then everyone could, I guess, fight over them.
And so when you're doing things like this, is this top of funnel marketing for you? Are you in your joy when you're doing that? Is it both? Like how is this playing out for you?
I'm so this is so my element. Like, I love it. So I get to work with the communities to help deliver programming. They get to see what we do every day and how we would engage with their residents. But for me, I love older adults. Like, I love them.
And having seen so many different communities, what does it make you think about your own mom and, or parents or older people in your life when they're at that life stage, like what choices will you make? What will you be advocating for in terms of their care and their circumstances?
So for me, it's definitely like, I know my mother wants to age in place, like most people, like 98% of people want to age in place. Yeah. So I think for me, it's really making sure that my mom's house, and she has a new husband. So, this later in life husband action we've got going on here. So for me, I'm just thinking of like aging in place. I want to make sure that she has everything in the home to accommodate how she lives. Yeah. I want to make sure, there's grab bars in the bathroom, because the reality is too, falls can just change an entire trajectory of life when you're older. And it's so unfortunate when you look at the numbers of like someone falls and they break their hip, and just like this person who was out and about and doing all these things and were independent, they now have a walker, and they now have, all these different health ailments because of that fall. Yeah. So
isn't there a stat around the percentage of women who are over either 60 or 65 and fall and break a hip, are dead within 12 months? I'm pretty sure it's close to 50%.
It probably is close to 50%, because it's, we actually did something with the Georgia Center on Aging in regards to falls and also to socialization for optimal health. Because even things around your house, like we have this rug that's around us. Rugs are a trip hazard. So it's like, if you're not going to have something down to really make sure you have that rug secured, then maybe you just shouldn't have a rug in the house. Yeah. So making sure that we're making those alterations to the home, but also to making sure again and again that our paperwork is in place. Because that's so important. I think too many people take for granted that their loved ones are in excellent health, and something can change in a heartbeat. That's just life. And if your paperwork is not in order, if you don't have those health directives, if you don't have that will, it can be a situation.
You have a will? You have your health directives?
I do.
Yeah, I'm behind.
I do.
I'm putting it way in public that I got to do that now.
I'll hold you accountable.
Okay, thank you. And aging in place, 98% of people want to do this. You're in the business of combating loneliness.
Yeah.
Do you worry that it's worse for folks aging in place compared to others if they're going to spend more time, isolated and at home? Like, were you advocating for that? Is it a healthier environment? Do you think high school for seniors is better? Like, how do you think about those pros and cons?
I think they're both great environments. I think one of the things that's just so important is if someone is at home, is do they have access to go out of their home? Are they going out? Are they going for walks? Is someone picking them up and taking them somewhere? Maybe they can drive, but what are they doing to be active and engaged? Because if they're not socializing, that's the problem when they're aging in place. But they can have the same exact problem in a community. There are so many people who self-isolate. They will not come out of their room. They'll come out for dinner, and that's it.
What's behind the self-isolating in a place that's communal living?
So I think there's a lot of different factors, but I think some are when family members just place their loved one in and don't ask them what they want to do. Or if they have the conversation about placement, but it can't be an option that you're home. Like sometimes, like with the clients I had on the real estate side, it just was no longer an option for their loved one to be home. There was, either a fall that happened before, and now I've gotten the call, we need to sell mom's house. She needs to move in with us, or she needs to move to a community, or we need to move her to a condo or something like that. But yeah, I don't think there's one that's like better than the other. I think it's just all about making sure how that person continues to socialize and engage.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense, that you can go either route and have it work super well, or either route and wound up lonely if it gets misapplied. When we think about, the silver tsunami and folks getting older at such a rapid race and our population changing, I feel like a lot of the media I interact with around that is kind of like, sound the alarm, doomsday, Social Security's going to break, how are we going to take care of everybody? Like, sorry, next generation.
Right.
Not to mention like quality of life for folks as they get older. Where's your like optimism, pessimism meter? Like, what are you worried about, particularly excited about? Are you worried? Like, how do you think about the landscape of things?
So I'm worried about just the actual labor part. And I'm also worried about how like thinking about the baby boomers and their parents who are in the silent generation, millennials and baby boomers that are aging. I just think of how does that work on the caregiving side? If you are working, having a family, especially like that sandwich generation right now, that's 60 some million people that are taking care, they're responsible for the care of their child and they're responsible for the care of an aging parent. Like they're caught in the middle financially on every side. You're paying for daycare. You're also trying to help for your parents. Like maybe your parents didn't save enough or they don't have long-term care insurance and you're footing that bill as well. It's a heavy load. So I think the financial part of people just really thinking about care is what scares me because I feel like no one's paying attention to that part of like, am I having the conversations with my parents? What do we need to do financially in case XYZ happens? And then on the actual staffing side, how will we have enough caregivers for everyone when people are continuing to leave? Like some communities are sometimes paying 2 to 3 times the rate for staff to make up for when people call out because they just don't have the labor. So that's the part that scares me. It's a tough job. I'll never forget. I was at a community. We were doing card making, and a caregiver came up, and she's like, "Mr. Smith, let's go to the bathroom." And he's like, "I don't want to go to the bathroom." And she's like, "Come on, it's time for you to go to the bathroom. Like, this is the time that we go." And so we ended up having an accident while we were sitting there. And, she finally helped him up. But I'm like, for him, I don't know if he felt any embarrassment, but he may have felt embarrassment, at the situation. For her, she now has something that kind of could have been prevented. Now she has a bigger mess to clean up. Yeah. And that's hard to sell to when you're paying them certain wages. Totally. It just is what it is. So that's what scares me. But the optimism of it all is technology is getting better. You have so many different opportunities for non-invasive monitoring in the home so that you can see has been there a change in mom's gait, are there lights lighting up as she's walking to the bathroom? Because that's another hazard at night. When you're walking to the bathroom, it's dark. Yeah, of course, everything is, your route. You've been here 30 years, but maybe you left a book on the floor today, or maybe something is in your way. So I think that optimism is how technology will continue to play a role and make things better. And hopefully, too, the Alzheimer's and dementia numbers go down some way because right now they're so high and caregivers aren't getting enough support. And it's like people aren't taking promotions at work. Why? Because I need to care for my mom. I need to make sure I have that flexibility. Yeah. So how do we make sure to empower our workforce while still understanding that they have care needs that they're going to have to deal with?
Yeah, I want to unpack kind of each of those. So we talked about the labor challenges. Mm-hmm. We talked about families navigating financial and care situations. And then certainly want to talk about tech optimism and like what tech can and can't do in this space. So first on the labor front, I did a study with McKinsey Global Institute, the think tank, a few years ago. We looked at different types of employment that were likely to be automated or subject to automation. And one of the findings of that study was that Black women are overrepresented in roles that are not likely to be automated, but because that is characterized by home health aide, nurse aide, senior caregivers, and otherwise. And those roles tend to be low pay, to your point. Yeah. And then like heavily physically intensive. Yeah. And so a lot of growing demand in the labor market on one hand, but on the other hand, like that's a dirty job in some instances. Right. That's a tough job. Like what you just articulated would take an emotional toll on somebody. Yeah. And so if I'm optimistic, I'm thinking, well, maybe the labor market is just going to command a higher salary for those roles because they're going to have to fill the need. And like that's the way supply and demand works. But on the other hand, like that has traditionally been a low paying job and a tough job. Like, how do you see that playing out?
I think that's one of those things where it's like, when it comes down to a lot of times CNA, certified nursing assistants, not only are they kind of giving medicine in certain instances or doing certain things, but they'll also be bringing food. So like, that's where I see technology coming in. Okay, instead of them also doing the food part, a little robot can come down and deliver the food, But again, if someone can't open their door, then that's another, then that person needs to be actually served. But for other people who are able to open the door, they can hear the doorbell. Like maybe there's, an announcement that comes over to that person's room, or they ring them before saying, hey, your robot's coming. Like, I feel like things like that will be helpful. But I think the pay part is just going to continue to be difficult. And unless there is a way where you can almost work with other organizations to give people additional work. And maybe that work isn't so labor intensive, but they can partner with another organization where they can kind of work a second job, get a few extra hours, and it's a little less labor intensive. I feel like there's going to have to be more partnerships in order to keep people in that part of the labor force.
Totally. I mean, I'm hiring for hourly instructors for kids gymnastics gym right now. And I had a couple people say, they were looking for different care jobs. And like, if one route is, a senior care aide, and then another is teaching a kids gymnastics class, like pretty drastically different environment at relatively similar pay scales. Yeah.
I'm going with the kids. Yeah. I'm going to go play with kids.
Yeah. Seems like you might not, but
but I won't.
But I know what you mean for sure. And then, are you seeing any innovation on the labor market side? Is there either a type of assisted living or other facility that's doing better than others? Is there a geography or a state? Like, is someone ahead of solving that challenge in ways that others aren't?
It's interesting because I read a lot of industry news. I talk to a lot of people, and everything that I see, nothing really has to do with labor. That's what I think is so interesting. So I think it's an amazing opportunity, but it's going to have to be how do you help those operators maintain? The reality is they have to maintain good numbers. Like you have to be able to pay for your staff. You have to be able to pay for the food. And again, all these rising costs, you have food rising, gas is higher. So when you have the bus, the community bus that you're using to bus to events, well, now gas is higher, insurance is higher. So it's like, how are you going to offset those costs that keep coming up? So on the labor side, I'm sure there's something. I just haven't seen that much innovation. But you know who, actually country-wise, Canada. Canada makes such a massive investment in how they take care of their older adults. And from universities to private organizations to like think tanks, they are just, every time I see something, I'm like, oh, let me apply. I'm like, Canada. So
what are the benefits that's driving for Canada and Canadians?
I think for them, because their healthcare is covered the way it is, I think it's really a proactive approach, almost like risk mitigation of like, oh, let's make sure we keep our population healthy. But I also feel like at the same time, while it's that, I think it's also a certain reverence. And so I appreciate that the Surgeon General, he just released the social media warning that he's like, it should have a warning label. I completely agree. But last year it was about loneliness, and he talked about all age groups. And there's another group as well, men right now in their 40s, like they are lonely. If you have your friends with kids and then you have your friends who are still going out partying, going to Vegas every quarter, those are two different lifestyles. And you're still friends, but you may not have that same closeness. So I appreciated that he talked about that, but I think that also provided us with another platform to say, look at how connection equals greater health. Because if your older loved one is lonely, socially isolated, and I think another point I always tell people is that you can be lonely and not be alone. We could be here sitting in a room with people, and I could still feel lonely and alone, despite all the people.
I just read the other day, 77% of suicides trending towards 80 is men at this point. So it's like 4 to 1 men likely to kill themselves. And the biggest, whatever the opposite of a determinant is, preventative factor rather, is, are they feeling connected? Are they feeling in community with people?
And that's the thing. It's like there is a young lady here in Atlanta, Chantel. She just graduated from GSU gerontology, and her focus is on suicide prevention amongst older males. because the reality is it's just at a higher level. And, you think about it, if you were, if you were whatever, commercial developer, and you had all these meetings and you had politicians, you did this and that, and now you just don't have that same recognition from people, that same look from people. Maybe people look at you and you can see that they're looking at you and look weak, and they may not, but psychologically in your mind,
or they're talking to you in a baby voice,
right?
And you're like, no, I'm a titan.
I'm
just
a man,
older,
right?
Yeah.
I'm just older. So I think that's one of those things too. Is just that whole like prism of life just looks different, and it's like, well, why am I here? I think that's the thought, and so that's why we're so much like we're so glad you're here. We're so glad to be talking to you because as much as we hope we're giving them, they give us. We learn with every call. Like the things that I've learned, I didn't know all cars were black when they came out. I didn't know that. It's like, oh, I didn't have a car that was a different color until 1948. I was like, wait a minute, what?
That was probably incendiary when that happened. It's like, you can get green. You can get green?
Right.
Yeah, I didn't thought about that. That's not actually a really long time. It was like 30 years of all black cars.
Oh, right.
Until they're like, wait.
Wait, we've got colors.
Wait a second. I got an idea of what if we made.
Yeah.
It probably wasn't green.
I have no idea. But I remember he definitely said it was a green 1948. It was his first car that was not black.
Yeah. What about, all right, so that was labor.
Yes.
And put a pin in, we're going to talk physician-assisted suicide, so we're going to come back to that.
Yeah.
But so labor, and then now shifting back to the family dynamic piece a little bit. You mentioned, have that conversation, know what your loved one wants.
Yeah.
That's a hard conversation. And
It
I
is.
feel like compared to most people, I have thought about this more than others. And I've read a couple books on aging, and I see it as a thing intellectually from a societal macro perspective and like coming in my life.
Yeah.
And still, I have kicked that can down the road a number of times.
Yeah.
From like actually talking about it brass tacks with my parents. So like, how do you have that conversation, and have you helped any folks have it? Like, what are some resources or ways that people can think about those tough conversations with family?
So one of the things, it's funny. So we have a chief nursing officer, Nurse Lily, and she's amazing. And one of the things that I remember her saying was, have a conversation when everyone can laugh about things. Because once you can't laugh about it, it's not like that means the conversation is really one-sided. It's not.
But when you're
it's not
laughing
together.
is like not when you want to. Like, by the way, let's talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's really, so my suggestion is, hey mom, hey dad, we're doing some family planning on our side, and we want to make sure that you're part of that planning too. Can you get your documents together, and maybe we'll set a time on the calendar for 2 weeks from now or a month from now. I'll check in. And so if it's a month from now, I'll check in with you with 2 weeks. I'm just going to give you like a little list, and that way we can go over everything together. And that way you're kind of giving them that list. You're giving them time to say, let's talk about these things together. You're saying, I'm starting it with myself. I'm young. I'm starting it with myself to make sure everything's in place. And I want to make sure we're on the same page. And the other thing is that just thinking about, I think a lot of people, when they are older, like, yes, they acknowledge I've got to get these things in place. But at the same time, it's like looking in the mirror of
mortality. Yeah, on the brink of everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I always suggest saying, I'm doing this on my side. Yeah. And it made me realize I need to know where your paperwork is. We need to make sure that we have a family plan is not just us four who are here. It's you too.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's all of us. That's really good. What do you commonly see people get wrong in that, or like anything to avoid?
I think the biggest thing, and I hear this is not from my own perspective, but from the elder attorneys that I talk with, is that people are coming to them when it's too late, when they know cognitive issues have been happening, maybe things have been starting, but you can't have your mom sign a power of attorney if now she has a diagnosis of dementia. Yeah. It's not going to fly. So like, you have to make sure you're doing these things early, or else then you're really at the mercy of a system because you don't have that paperwork.
Yeah, totally. Is there I mean, obviously there is a business, but have you ever thought about incorporating some of that element into Happy Talks? And if so, why? If not, why not?
So I've always thought about, I just always wants to be a branch and just a resource for people. So I think if we did, it would be like probably 5 years from now or something. And it would be, but I've always looked at more of like a partnership of just like, who can we partner with that's their expertise. So we'll be experts in bringing your loved one joy, and they'll be experts in whatever thing that we've referred them to.
Yeah, totally. And the core need for Happy Talks, is that something that you see as a natural manifestation of the fact that folks are living longer and longer, and like, that's great, and now we can fill this need? Or is there something about it that is depressing? And I ask because like I'm generally curious. Like, you know, my parents are in North Carolina, in different parts of North Carolina. I live a state away, and I'm like part of the problem, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't all live together and on the same street and otherwise. And part of me is like, well, that's just kind of the way things are in 2024.
It is.
Part of me is like, but we're getting it wrong. So like, I'm curious, like, how, when you think a societal view and you think about that, like, how do you see the landscape and the need for something like this?
I think everything is just so different now. And it's also, our world is very loud right now. Like, and I just think with these phones, it will never go back to not being loud. So I think with other cultures that they definitely have a different view of, like, even with, you're 18 and it's like, get out of the house, you know, in the US versus other countries, it's like, stay here. Build yourself up, save your money, like help with your grandparents here in the house. It's just different culturally here. So I think that's something that we can't go backwards on, you know? So I think in a lot of ways, our society is the way it is going to be here and the way that culture is. But I see it as again, we live in this loud world, and you know, there's all these things on social media. There's all these, and you know, I have to digress for 2 seconds. There was a young lady, I want to say she was like 73, and she showed me the picture of her sister who used an AI photo of herself for her new Facebook photo. And I was like, what is happening? Yeah. So I think too, you have this generation that also, yes, they didn't grow up with technology, but they've been around it long enough. And at least in my eyes, the past 20 years feels like it's been probably 40 years of developments. You know, we look at what's happened between the iPhone, iPod back in the day, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the biggest thing is that we have to just continue to meet people where they are right now, because there's just so many things coming at everyone, including older adults. And you think of the spam calls. Like you just said, you're getting a ton of spam calls. Like, how does that work for someone who's older, who's getting call after call after call? Just talked to a Medicare person yesterday who said Medicare fraud is on the rise, because as soon as they know it's Medicare season, then they're probably calling and saying, oh, we can get you this and this. And you get so many calls. Who do you know who you can trust? Yeah. So I think there has to be a way that there can just be more trusted resources for our seniors, and just more protection. But that also goes back to our privacy laws in the US. Like, why don't we have privacy laws like the EU? It should be a little more difficult. How in the world were they almost able to take Graceland, the scammer? Like, if they're doing that to Graceland, trying to steal, what are they going to do to grandma?
Yeah. Who's leading on on fraud prevention, anti-fraud efforts?
AARP has been amazing with anti-fraud efforts. They are always holding webinars. They are always, I get their magazine every month. They are always having articles about things to do. They have numbers to call. So I think they are definitely leading the charge. And then I would also say the agencies around area agencies on aging, AAA agencies. Yeah. I think they're also locally leading the charge for their particular communities to make sure that they're having events and different things on how to protect seniors.
Yeah. I'm with you what you said earlier, that defrauding seniors like burns in a unique way. It's like, come on. Like,
and the crazy thing is, the FBI literally just reported last year's numbers. It's $3 billion. People have worked their whole entire lives for this money, and $3 billion just last year has defrauded seniors. Like, there's a special place for those people. There's a special place.
What zooming out slightly, thinking about the role of technology. So we're recording live, Atlanta Tech Village.
Yeah.
You already mentioned going through an ATV program and being here now. What can tech do in this space? And not just fraud. I'm talking about overall senior care. And what can tech not do? Like, what's the uniquely human role?
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, what are you particularly optimistic about? What do you maybe have reservations about as you think about the rollout of technology?
I think like with technology, like AI, it's great. You know, you need a starter for your marketing campaign for you to think of, throw your thoughts in, boom, something spits out. I think the other side of that is if someone's trying to commit fraud and they can easily go in and, like, actually last year, when you think about the primary, and in New Hampshire, they cloned Joe Biden's voice and put something out and said, don't vote today. And the fact that people are easily going onto these sites, like some sites have thankfully shut it down, but you have others that don't. And someone will go in there. All you have to do is find your granddaughter's video from the beach. All I need is 2 seconds, and all of a sudden they're calling you talking about I'm in Mexico and I can't.
Yeah,
I'm stuck.
Need help because I'm stranded.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that on the technology side is what scares me, is because not only can they do these things, but they can also amplify their efforts. So what they may have done onesie twosies with technology, maybe they can send it out to 1,000 quicker. Yeah. So I think the numbers part of that is scary, but I think the great thing is too, is that when you think of VR, the fact that like you could create things and they can wear what is that? wear the headset and, you know, and they can be transported to maybe this part of Paris that they used to love to go to or whatever, or this bakery. I think technology has a way to bridge memories and help with maybe just sharpening cognition. Mm-hmm. So I look at technology and I have hope in that way. But then on the other side, it scares me with those humans that decide to scam.
Yeah, totally. I've heard that families should think about like a safe word or like a reliable password, that if I don't say this, it doesn't matter what else I'm saying, but it's not me.
Yeah, that's one thing I always preach. I always preach a safe word, and you know, and making sure, and also too, not just with the safe word having it, but making sure that you practice with your loved one, because that scammer could try to trick them. Like, well, wait a minute, I thought you changed the safe word, and then it's like, no, remember you said the safe word was life. And it's like, you just gave him the safe word, Mom. You know, so you have to make sure to practice these situations, and also to make sure to tell your loved one, hang up the phone. If they don't say the word, you don't give them another chance. You just hang up the phone, and then you call the number that you know to reach who you need to reach.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it doesn't happen quick, call me or call someone else whose number you actually have. Yeah,
right.
That makes sense. What about from like a caregiving standpoint?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we mentioned the robot coming in, bringing food. Like, I'm wondering if and how long until we all have our personal like C-3PO who's taking care of us and doing all the things that I don't want to do around the house. Kind of excited.
That'd be awesome.
That. In the core caregiving motion, do you see a role for technology, and like how far away is that, if so?
You know, I think the one thing, caregiving is just so personal, and there's so many situations. Like, I am not a caregiver. I know a lot of caregivers, and all of their experiences are so different. So I think with technology making an impact could be anything that helps lighten their load when it comes to information. Mm-hmm. Like, Mom has 5 doctors. How do we make sure, like, why should they have to do all of this extra work to make sure, you know, the other doctor gets the information? Why isn't there an easier pass off? Like, things like that I hope technology brings a difference, because that's the biggest thing I think with technology that can help, is that patient experience. Because right now, whenever I talk to caregivers, their frustration of but I've sent this 5 times. But I told you could send it to them. But you're the one who recommended this doctor to me. Why am I now having to do X, Y, Z? Like that frustration, it just seems a lot. But I feel like the other part of it is such a human connection. You're my mom, you're my grandmom, that would be the biggest place, because that connection part is just so huge on the day-to-day of care, and then seeing how they may be changing.
Yeah. And I would also, hearing what you're saying, it's like if that busy mom who's in the sandwich generation, who's taking care of her own mom, so grandma in this instance, let's say that there's a finite window of time she can account for this. If a greater percentage of that can be doing human-to-human interaction standpoints with her mom, and less admin or going to get something out of the microwave or whatever else is the non-caregiving essential time, and then more of the actual human-to-human time, that seems like a win.
I definitely think it's a win. It's like I see all these transportation companies that have popped up, and I love it because it's like, no, I'm not going to stick my mom in an Uber. Like nothing's wrong with Uber, but I want someone who understands that my mom is maybe medically fragile. Yeah. That understands that we need a lift to go, or, she's going to need someone walked into her appointment. I can't have her just dropped off outside. So I think medical transportation is going to continue to be just a huge resource. Because again, if I'm in that meeting and I'm like in between my meeting trying to like write my notes for my HOA because I volunteer. Oh, wait a minute. I'm also trying to make sure pickup. It's just a lot. So it's like, what can you do to outsource? And then how can you do it quickly and efficiently? And still also have your eyes on what's going on. Like, how do I know mom was dropped off? She got to the appointment. It's done. Like, I also want to look at my phone and have all those checks to know.
Yeah, totally. Age tech.
Yes.
I know there's an age tech meetup that happens at ATV. Like, what is the community, like, what stage of development is age tech in? Is there a community? Is Atlanta leading? Is it trailing? Like, where is it?
We are leading.
Yeah.
We are leading. I have to get up to Jeff and Gordon, who are fearless leaders at Age Tech Atlanta. They do such an amazing job of now actually coaching companies across the country. Like, countries across the country are calling them to say, hey, what do you think about this? How can I grow here? It's incredible because people now see that there's so many companies who are actually working to make living longer better, to make longevity just an easier road and a way that we can be stronger. Like Vivo, we talked about Vivo earlier, like the fact that it's that strength training, you can be at home and you can like do your weights and do everything. Well, when you're strength training, you have a better chance of not getting dementia. Like all of these things correlate to better health.
Yeah, totally. And how does that community work with one another, support one another here?
It's so supportive. I was so mad I missed the meeting this morning because I had meetings, but it's very supportive. We're always learning about what people are doing. We're partnering. If there's grant opportunities, we're sending them out to each other. It's just a really supportive community of just like, what are you doing? Who do you know? Is there an opportunity here? So it's not competitive at all. It is, and everyone's at all different stages. There's people who are just starting their companies, and then there are people, they're multi-million-dollar organizations.
Okay, got it. That's cool. Shifting gears a little bit, I did want to talk about physician-assisted suicide.
Yeah.
And just curious what you have seen and heard about that. Is there much chatter? Is it not a topic that gets a lot of play? Like first question is like, how much is that on people's consciousness and radar right now? Is it a topic that's happening?
What's interesting? I haven't heard a lot about it. I think if anything, I've just been hearing about the rise in older male suicide, but not physician assisted. I haven't heard that much chatter.
So that's more coming from older male suicides rising. How do we try to stop that?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your thought about, self-determination in later stage of life?
I think it's one of those things where, again, human connection, no matter what you're doing with an app or whatever, it's great. But I just think that's why human connection is so important. It's like, if someone has an opportunity to say, like, what you said earlier, and he's like, I'm a Titan. Like, you're talking to me in a baby voice and I'm a Titan. Like, for that man to feel heard and for him to be able to tell his stories about how he closed this deal that no one else could close at his company, or how he, saved his wife from doing XYZ, or saved the company, whatever. I think the opportunity to just tell those stories and know that you're being heard. Like, every time that I hear, thank you for calling, I want to cry, because I'm like, thank you for letting me listen to you. Thank you for letting me talk to you, Yeah. So, yeah.
And then what about when someone is at the last, and if they want to have control over when and how they end their life?
Yeah.
Do you have any strong sense of if that should or shouldn't be allowed? It feels like a major frontier that we're going to play out either legislatively or in the healthcare system or personal decisions or otherwise.
I could definitely see that. I mean, I'm always a person for choice. That's just my personal ethos, is choice. So I feel like if you've come to this point in your life and you're older and things have happened and maybe you're really ill, like, it's one of those things where it should be their choice to say goodbye and, like, really plan it to say, hey, I want my family to come here. I want to talk to them. I want this to be the day. I think you should have the choice to do that.
Do you know anybody who is working in that space in Atlanta, or anybody who's trying to lead and advance that?
There is one woman, I want to say her name is Mara. I watch her from afar on Twitter. Fascinated. I can't call it X. But she, I just can't. She has a personal care home. And so that's one of the things that she talks about on Twitter quite frequently is, this should be my resident's choice to say goodbye. And so I find that fascinating. And, I think about even too, words matter. Like when we talk about elderly versus older adults or seniors, palliative care versus hospice. Like, one thing I learned, just again, I'm constantly learning, I'll never stop, but is how families, they don't want to hear the word hospice because that means the end. But if it's palliative care, that's different. That's care. That's care that we're doing for my loved one. And they're going through that, but this is associated with care. So just...
physician assisted suicide needs there are other words.
Like a rebrand.
That's not, having the suicide word in there at all.
Yeah, it just does. I think it naturally just turns people's brains a different way as soon as you hear that word. But like, if it's almost like a goodbye, whatever, I think that would have a different way of people looking at it, because then it's like, this is this person's choice in a healthy way of what they want to do and how they're choosing to end their time here. Yeah.
Totally. I got a few round robin questions, but before we go there, any for folks listening, I imagine the audience is going to be more people who might be making decisions about end of life care or later life care for people in their family.
Yeah.
Any other kind of advice or reflections that you'd offer to them from having seen all that you've seen?
I would definitely say find reputable elder care attorneys in your area and start talking to them now, because every state is different and you don't know what the laws are. Start talking to them now about what documents you should have in place in your state. I think that's like number one. And then number two is really going to, again, reputable resources like AARP, the National Council on Aging, like making sure that you're finding reputable places to get your information, because the scammers are just out there. And if there's a way for them to find a way in, they are going to try to manipulate information, send you to a wrong website, whatever, pay for this. So don't pay for any type of information other than legal, or if there's someone Now, there's definitely services to pay for, but again, just making sure that they're reputable. And, you may even want to call the area agency on aging in your community. That way you can see who they've partnered with and what organizations they know about. Yeah. But you just want to make sure that you're always checking your source.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, a couple rapid fire Atlanta questions because we're on the Macon Atlanta podcast. Favorite Atlanta meal?
Oh, can I name 3? Okay.
You can name 3.
Okay.
Yeah. This is dealer's choice. Dealer's choice.
So, tacos and tequila.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, their chicken chimichanga is so good. It's like perfectly crispy. And then I love Sarin in Virginia Highlands. Like their Thai food is just incredible.
Yep.
I had a third one like at the top of my. But it's Mexican too. Botica. I love Botica and Buckhead. Like,
you can have 2 Mexican on there. There's no rules. This is yours. Favorite book you've read recently, or just kind of piece of content you've interacted with?
Oh my gosh, I am reading right now Legacy, and it's incredible. It's by a Black doctor. Her name's Dr. Uche. I can't think of her last name, but her and her twin sister are both doctors. Went to Harvard, and
Casual.
right, and they're just talking about really all of the systemic things in the healthcare system that really are the underlining reasons of inequity in healthcare. It's been a fascinating read so far. I've learned so much, and I'm like, every time I get a break, I'm reading it. Yeah.
Okay.
I've got the book copy. I'm not Audible on this one.
Okay. Legacy. All right. We'll put it out there. And then last is, what is a habit that you think, when you survey kind of modern culture and that we kind of are in right now, that maybe it's like a norm, something that people do, but maybe it's not ultimately like serving us as well as it should be. Like, what's your view on one of those habits, and what would you replace it with?
Oh, that's a good question, Brent. I think one of those habits would really be always having a phone in our hand. I think that's what it would be. I'm very conscious about putting my phone down now. Because I'm like, what was I doing when I was 17? I wasn't doing this. I didn't have a phone in my hand. I didn't have my phone till college. But I think really putting our phone down and like looking around and truly just looking around, or being able to sit in silence. I just wonder now how many people can really take an hour, sit in silence.
Can you? For an hour?
Totally.
Is that meditating or journaling, or like?
That's like me just thinking.
Wow.
That's totally me just thinking, and like, yeah. And I've been very, very, like, I would say almost stringent about how I've been doing it weekly now, of just making sure that I'm setting my phone. Like, I noticed yesterday, I was like on my phone and my husband's talking to me, I'm doing something. And then he said, "Did you just hear what I said?" And I was like, you know what? I put my phone on. I said, "I sure didn't. Tell me again." Yeah. But you realize how you're like scattered, because now, again, the world is so loud. We are listening to so many things at the same time. Yeah. I'm on TikTok on my phone. I've got my iPad open, and I'm shopping my Target app. Oh, wait a minute. And I'm watching Murder, She Wrote. It's a lot going on.
Yeah. Somebody asked me the other day, they were like, why are you doing video for some of these podcasts? Because if you're doing audio, then you can also be doing email or something else and listening. And I'm like, I get it, but also like, no, you can't.
No, you can't.
Like, and that is one of the good things about a podcast.
Yeah.
You can do something else and have it on the background. I get it. But also I feel like trying to do 2 things at once is like part of the symptom. Yeah.
And it's what I'm really working to get away from. Like, finish this and then do that and then do that. Like, because at the end of the day, then I have 10 unsent emails because I started one that it made me think of someone else instead of just writing down email Kate. I now have 10 unfinished emails because I went and started the next one.
Yeah. Well, that's why I have to use all of my iPhones to film this. So I have no other phone to look at.
That's true.
What can anybody who wants to support you or learn more about Happy Talks, how can they support you? How can they learn more?
Yeah, well, they can go to happytalks.com. We also have a podcast, Love and Longevity with Christian Ross. So you can feel free to listen. We have...
That is a heck of a title. Love and Longevity.
Thank you. So personally, this year I'll be married 18 years. And so I love talking about love. I give a lot of unrequested, unsolicited love advice.
Nice. You got 47 more years to go.
Right. Exactly. 65.
65.
Gosh. And also too, like I'm on Instagram at Christian is Happy, and we're just hanging out. So feel free. You can always, we actually have a phone answering service too, 24/7. So if you just want to like leave us a note, and we do have a happiness hotline coming soon. So you can always call us at 470-68-HAPPY, and someone will answer.
That is awesome. I did not know. You should leave with that. Well, thank you very much for sharing your time and reflections. It's been awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Congrats on what you're building.
Thank you so much.
That's our show. Thank you, Christian, for the time. Thank you all for listening. This makes me want to make a phone call to my parents and have a couple important conversations. I hope you do the same. Let me know if you do. Let me know how it goes. As always, if you got input, ideas, questions, people you want to see here on the show, please let me know. Happy to pivot to that feedback, and appreciate all of you all listening and journaling alongside me. Thank you.